Welcome to Move the Chains with Jonathan Rivers. Here's your host, Jonathan Rivers.
And let there be football. Welcome into Move the Chains. I'm your boy, Jonathan Bam Rivers. And first, let me say Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everybody. I know I'm a few days late, but the show only comes on Saturday, so I'm doing what I can. And I thought about the naughty and nice pieces that have been littered throughout the NFL this year. So I said, well, let me go ahead and talk about my naughty and nice list in 2024 regarding the National Football League. And I've got 2 points that I want to make specifically on first down, and you definitely don't want to miss that. And the second down, I think it's great that we'll answer social media questions today because, man, I've been on Twitter and TikTok, and I've just been reading what people have to say. And a lot of it's laughable. A lot of it just kind of makes me ponder, like, what are people really thinking? Are you really watching these football games and understanding what's happening? So I answer some questions and kind of debunk some things that people are saying and also agree with some things because I think a lot of people have some sense of what's going on. And in my nonsense narrative, there are so many individuals that are upset at the College Football Playoff Committee based on the results of the first round playoff games. And I'm going to sit here and tell you that they didn't get it wrong. And you might want to add me to the naughty list for saying that, but I'm going to explain to you why the committee did not get it wrong in my nonsense narrative, so you definitely don't want to miss that. And lastly, rust versus rest. I'm going to tell you why that question has never been easier in my estimation. All that and more right here on Move the Chains. But you know how we do it. Let's kick it off at first down. All right, so as I sit back and watch all of these NFL games and all these college football games, but the NFL specifically here, I thought to myself, how about I just create a naughty and a nice list? Just to let you know what I've been thinking, to let you know what I've observed over the duration of this football season. We know we've got still one more week to go after this weekend's games. But up to this point, a lot has been solidified. So I really want to pinpoint what I think has been nice and what I think has been naughty. So let me get my first graphic here, Ernest. On the nice list, the Chiefs are closer to their ceiling. First, let me say this. The fact that the Kansas City Chiefs are closer to their ceiling means that they haven't even reached their ceiling. And this is a 15-1 team that just wrapped up home field through the AFC playoffs after beating Pittsburgh on Christmas Day. Now, if you watch the show faithfully, which I know you do, I've said this for months. I've said the Chiefs have the highest floor in the NFL. And what I mean by the Chiefs have the highest floor is that their worst is better than a lot of teams' best. Their margin of error is greater. Now, you may not think the Chiefs have had a high margin of error by the narratives that have been said. And what narratives are those? Well, one, the Chiefs are only one of 4 teams that haven't scored 30 points in a game this season. That is ultimately true. The Chiefs have not put up more than 29 points in any game this season. The other teams, the 3 teams combined, have 8 wins. So if there's a 15-1 team that hasn't scored 30 and the other 3 that haven't scored 30 have a combined win total of about 8 or 9 games, what does that tell you? It means one of those teams knows how to finish. 2, one of those teams is great in situational football. And 3, only one time has the team that hasn't scored 30 points given up more points than they've scored. So see, it doesn't factor in defense, and it always amazes me how at some point in time people forget that football is a 3-phase game, offense, defense, and special teams. And when you have a Kansas City Chiefs team that has an offense that holds the ball longer than anybody else, and they score points when they force turnovers based on their defense, and they have one of the best kickers in the NFL, they don't want to pull all of those ingredients into the same pot. They want to cherry pick why this team isn't good. And again, all I'm sitting here telling you is the Kansas City Chiefs get everybody's best every single week. Every single week I listen to people talk about why the Chiefs are going to lose. I hear them say the Chiefs are lucky. They never say the Chiefs are fortunate because the Chiefs are better prepared. They don't ever go back and talk about what the Chiefs were doing in training camp when they're preparing for the final 4 minutes of a game or the final 2 minutes of before the first half end, going into halftime. They never talk about the situational football when it's 3rd and 6 and they need to play, how the quarterback and Patrick Mahomes can make plays with his legs and get a first down, or how Andy Reid and Matt Nagy can scheme up a play, or how Steve Spagnuolo can draw up a blitz from a corner to break down an offensive line and not give them the numbers they need. All of that stuff isn't talked about. So the fact that I'm telling you that the Chiefs are closer to their ceiling means that if you're anybody in the AFC, if you're the Bills, you can beat the Chiefs. If you're the Ravens, you can beat the Chiefs. I truly believe that. But what I'm telling you is it's going to be that much harder because this team doesn't lack confidence. They don't lack situational awareness, and they don't lack what's probably the most important thing in the NFL, and that's being battle tested. They are who they are for a reason. All right, so that's my nice list. So let me tell you about my naughty list. Pity doesn't live in Pittsburgh. And before I get into this game, I'm going to tell you what I think is naughty, but I want you to hear these words from a post-game presser from All-Pro TJ Watt on the state of his team right now. Hit it, Ernest.
We need to work more.
Is that the same answer you look at as far as trying to get more pressure on the quarterback?
Yep. We need to continue to work, look ourselves in the mirror, and get back to work.
How frustrating is it to be at this point in the season when you do have to go back to work after the way things started out? We're in the middle of this year.
I'm excited to attack the work no matter the outcome. I love football. I love the process, and I know there's a lot of guys in the locker room that do also, so we just need to get back to work.
So, see, I appreciated TJ Watt saying those things. I wanted to show you that for a reason. The Pittsburgh Steelers have lost 3 games in a row. And if you looked at their schedule, I'm not necessarily shocked. Now, they easily could have gone 2-1 or 1-2 at worst, but they lost all 3 games. And the back half of their schedule was always going to be the toughest part of the schedule. And again, I'll ask you this. They had to play the Ravens and the Chiefs in back-to-back weeks. I don't know. Are there many teams going undefeated against the Ravens and the Chiefs in back-to-back weeks? I don't think they are. Now, I'm telling you this because nobody feels sorry for Pittsburgh. And more importantly, TJ Watt, Mike Tomlin, those players don't feel sorry for themselves. And I've heard a lot of rhetoric about conversations coming out of Pittsburgh with Cam Hayward, their star defensive tackle, saying, you know, when 10 people do a job on defense and one person doesn't, we're screwed. And a lot of people are trying to say, well, who are they talking about specifically? Or are they really talking about Russell Wilson in code and they don't want to say it? I'm just thinking people look for a reason. Russell Wilson hasn't been great the past 3 weeks in his 3-game winning streak. He also hasn't had George Pickens the majority of that time. But what I am telling you is when a defensive player tells you that when 10 people are doing their job and one person doesn't, he's telling you that it takes 11 people to get a job done because it is assignment football. Defense is gap assignment and assignment football. So the naughty part about this is that people are trying to conjure up all of these other things regarding what Pittsburgh is clearly telling you. TJ Watt says we have to be better. We can't run away from the work. Mike Tomlin's telling you that we've turned the ball over and haven't been forcing turnovers. We have to be better in the red zone. We have to play better defense. There's no code for that. That is straight up truth. And you might be down on Pittsburgh right now, and all I tell you is teams go on losing streaks unless you're the Kansas City Chiefs and the Detroit Lions and the Buffalo Bills this year to a certain extent. Most teams go on losing streaks. Some happen at the beginning of the season, and they get hot. Some happen now. Now, are you worried that they're on their losing streak and they're playing their worst football going into the playoffs? Absolutely. I am as well. But what I do know is that they can right the ship simply by playing one play at a time and understanding who they are when it comes to Pittsburgh Steelers football. Now, that's the question. Do the Steelers understand that identity and who they are in this moment in time? Well, that's for a future Hall of Famer Mike Tomlin to figure out. That's why he is who he is, and the Pittsburgh Steelers have been who they have been. All right, when we come back from the break on Second Down, it'll be your social media questions. More Move the Chains right after this. And welcome back to Move the Chains. And before we get into your social media questions on Second Down, as always, on every single show, I want to take this opportunity to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for hosting Move the Chains. It's a blessing. I'm so glad that I'm purposed to do this and to speak life into people through football, and I'm going to enjoy doing it. So thank you to my Lord and Savior. Secondly, I want to thank you, the fans, especially, Chris Brunson and his brother. I really want to take the time to thank you guys, Tico, who watched the show faithfully, because it means a lot. And they're just two that have told me that they watch the show consistently this past week when I've seen them. So shout out to the Brunson boys and their family for watching the show amongst everybody else that watches it. And last but not least, man, my production crew from Helen to, like I said, to Ernest, to Aaron, to Josiah. The conversations between myself, Ernest, and Josiah before this show are legendary. Like, we're going to get them on camera one day. But I just want to tell you, they do something that can't be done by many people. So shout out to the best production crew in the business. Hey, but you know what time it is right now. Let's go to Second Down. All right, so social media questions are what we have today, and I'm really, really interested in answering these questions. So let's go ahead and get to the first one. Have the Houston Texans regressed? The answer is no. And I understand that a lot of people think C.J. Stroud hasn't played as well as he did last year. I told you that would happen before the season started, right? It's the law of averages. It's going to happen. He's still a good quarterback. He just has some growing pains. But I'll ask you this. Where were the Houston Texans 4 or 5 years ago when they brought in David Culley to be the head coach 1 year, then let him go? Lovie Smith was the head coach for 1 year, let him go. They had Deshaun Watson, who was one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but then got hurt. This was a laughingstock of an organization. Nobody wanted anything to do with Houston. And then they make the trade for Deshaun Watson to go to Cleveland and get all those draft picks. And then they drafted C.J. Stroud. And then they drafted Will Anderson Jr. And then they bring in guys like Henry To'oTo'o. And then they bring in guys like Joe Mixon and Daniil Hunter. And then they draft guys like Bullock. And they draft individuals, Kamari Lashner, that are now staples and starters on their team that are very young and very hungry. This team is building for the future. And just because they're not in a championship contender like you thought they would be, doesn't mean that they've regressed. It means that they're on track. The first thing you have to be a champion is be a consistent contender. And if last time I checked, they've won 2 straight AFC South titles. It's not the best division in football. Nobody else has won it the last 2 seasons. So again, I didn't even pick them to win the division this year. I picked the Colts, and I said the Texans would be a wild card team. But they're another division winner, which means they get a wild card game at home this year like they did last year, and they can easily be in the divisional round for the second straight year. With a second-year quarterback and a second-year head coach and young talent that are the core of your team, I think that's pretty good. All right, what do we have for my second question? Are the Vikings legit Super Bowl contenders? Absolutely, man. Somebody asked me before the season started, who's the team that's going to be overlooked in 2024? And I said the Vikings. And it's because people are going to look at the Vikings losing Kirk Cousins. Great thing for the Vikings. And bringing in Sam Darnold. Because he played for the Panthers and the Jets, you thought he was bad? No. Kevin O'Connell is a good coach. Brian Flores is a heck of a coach. They might be the best offensive-defensive coordinator combo outside of guys like Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo, to be honest with you, because they're that good. Buffalo with Sean McDermott and also Joe Brady are good as well, but these two take a backseat to hardly anybody. This team is complementary. They have weapons on the outside. They can run the football, and that defense, which is not the defense that was 32nd 2 years ago when they lost in the first round to the Giants, is that much better. They are a legitimate team because if they win their final 2 games, this team goes to the playoffs as the #1 overall seed. Just let that marinate. All right, what do we have for my last question? What is good QB play? Man, I'm so happy that I'm answering this question because people will see a stat line of 20 of 29 or 20 of 30, 245 yards and 0 touchdowns and say, well, the quarterback didn't really play that well. He didn't throw any touchdown passes. But yet if you watch the game, what if the quarterback got the team inside the 5-yard line with deep passes or matriculating down the field, making great decisions, and the running back runs the ball in or the run jet sweeps? Is that not a good game by the quarterback? See, quarterback play should be seen as great decision-making, should be seen as understanding situational football, should be seen as knowing when to throw the ball away or knowing when to take a sack so you can still kick a field goal, or knowing when to get the ball to a check down. So good quarterback play doesn't always mean gaudy statistics. So if you really knew the game, you would understand that statistics do matter, but statistics never tell the full story. All right, when we come back from the break, it's my favorite segment of the show. It's my nonsense narrative. Back with more Move the Chains right after this. Man, welcome back in. It's time for my favorite segment of the show. Let's not delay it any longer. It's time for my nonsense narratives. College football committee, playoff committee, they got it wrong. They blew it. They don't know what they're talking about. That's the rhetoric that I hear from so many people, including a one Lane Kiffin. What's up, Lane? I know he's watching Move the Chains down there at Ole Miss. So I'll say this. The committee didn't get it wrong because the committee set a specific set of criteria that they stuck by, and it gave them the 12-team college football playoff. Now, I don't like the way teams were seeded. That has to change. I don't necessarily like the fact that if you win your conference and you're ranked the highest conference champion, you should be one of the top 4 seeds. I don't like it. I don't even much care for the automatic bid, but that isn't even my problem. My problem is you telling me that because Indiana or SMU or Clemson, because they lost, they don't deserve to be in the college football playoff. Yes, they do. When they got blown out, they don't deserve to be there. When's the last time you've seen a college football playoff game in any year where there wasn't a blowout? Even in the 4-team college football playoff. This was the point Josiah, my producer, made to me before the show. And I said, I exactly agree with that statement because, see, what happens is you expect the expansion of a college football playoff to mean that there are going to be more good teams. There are still going to be 4 or 5 legit national championship contenders. I felt SMU should have gotten in based on what they did throughout the season and based on the criteria of the committee, but I never thought they would win a national championship. The one team I thought could compete and win a national championship that lost in the first round was Tennessee. And I watched that game, and that first drive where they got a sack but pulled the face mask of Ohio State did them in. Because rather than getting off the field and getting the ball 0-0, Ohio State went down and scored, and then the floodgates opened. My point is, I don't care what you do. Now we see a college football playoff format more like the NCAA format in basketball. It's not close, but it's closer than it's ever been. Don't we see chalk, meaning favorites, win the NCAA tournament a lot of the times? Don't we see the top 1 or 2 seeds win it? Right? If I would have asked you, hey, who'd you pick to win the national championship, you probably said Georgia or Texas or Oregon, right? Aren't those the teams that have byes? And aren't those the teams that are going to be playing coming up this week? So what are you upset about? And I said, well, Alabama would have beaten them or South Carolina would have beaten them. I understand that. But isn't it reasonable to think that South Carolina, Alabama, and Ole Miss could have lost those games as well? Isn't it reasonable that Miami could have gotten beat by Texas or Miami could have been beaten by a Notre Dame on the road? Isn't that plausible? So to say these teams didn't belong, if that's your argument before the college football playoff started, I have no problem with that. But to say that they don't deserve to be in because they didn't win the football game is hindsight at its worst, and it's completely wrong. The College Football Playoff Committee got it right based on the criteria they set. They change the criteria, then we'll have another conversation. All right, when we come back from the break, it'll be the final drive. Back with the last segment to Move the Chains right after this. And welcome back to Move the Chains. And this is the final segment of the show, so you know what that means. It's time for the final drive. Rest versus rust, specifically in the NFL, is always the question when it comes to whether or not you should rest your players if they solidify a top seed or their seed is not going to change based on the outcome of a game. Rest matters. It is imperative. An 18-week season, which has been implemented the past few years now, means that 1 seed means even more. If you're locked into the 2 seed, I understand if you want to play your game about a series, but rest is always more important. Don't necessarily worry about the rust. All right, don't forget, you can not only catch Move the Change right here on the Sports Leader WXTX Fox 54, but you can also catch us on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. It's at Move_the_Change. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. We're all here for it. All right, another banger in the holiday season, baby. For the best dang production crew in the business, I'm your boy, Jonathan Bam Rivers. Again, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Until next time here on Move the Chains, God bless.